Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Dragon's Library. Today, I am going to be talking about The Golden Enclaves by Naomi Novik. Oh, I'm just so excited for this. I've been waiting for it for so long, like a year, because that last cliffhanger was a doozy. But let's get into it. Going over the premise, this is the third book in what Naomi Novik has dubbed the Scholomance trilogy. Although it was supposed to be a duology, she later extended it into 3 books, and so here we are. The last book, The Last Graduate, was also reviewed by me, as was its predecessor, A Deadly Education. You can find links to those reviews in the description below. I recommend you go listen to them because these books continue directly, as in the ending scene is literally the first scene that's read over in this book. So all 3 of these books are directly connected to each other in timeline. There's no big old time skip between any of them. And as a result, you would be best served reading the previous ones, or at least listening to my reviews on the previous ones before you get to this one, because we can't really discuss it without discussing them, because there's a very continuous story. It's not as separated as the others. However, I will do my best to go over it without spoilers as much as I can, but there will be spoilers for the previous 2 books, so keep that in mind. So, after they attempted to destroy the Scholomance and sever it in all the Malficaria they piled into it from the world, Orion threw Galadriel out the gate while he went to go face down the Maw-Mouth's fortitude and patience. For those of you who don't know, Maw-Mouths are essentially the ultimate monsters. They grab hold of you, drag you inside, there's nothing you can do to stop them. They're basically unkillable, and you don't die, but instead you're suffering in anguish or used to power it with magic forever, until it dies or the universe collapses, whichever comes first. So you're basically suffering in agony forever, and it's basically the worst fate you can experience. With everybody caught up, let's get into this book. So, Elle gets pushed out the Scholomance, wakes up back home with her mom, and tries to rescue Orion. Doesn't go well, and she's devastated. After a few months of moping around, a week of moping around, she doesn't get a few months. This is the Scholomance we're talking about. She doesn't get time to rest and recuperate herself. A few of her friends from the London Enclave come and say there's a Maw-Mouths attacking them, and that enclaves are still being struck down, which they had heard about with Bangkok in the previous book. So Elle sets off to prove her grandmother wrong. Her grandmother prophesied she would be the great destroyer who would cast down enclaves and bring death and destruction to all the enclaves of the world. So she's out there trying to do her best, gather magic so she can bust back into the Scholomance and kill Patience and Fortitude and set Orion free, because she's accepted that he's dead. So she goes to London and sets out on a quest to basically do what little good she can and try and find a place for herself in a world without Orion. And that's all I can really say without going into spoilers. This book is very interesting. Now, there were a lot of twists in this book, and I called a lot of them. However, one of the things I really like is the characters, because Naomi Novik gets character writing, okay? You can give her books a lot of shade for some things. She's very heavy on exposition. Her first-person perspective can be a little wonky sometimes if you're a new reader. I got used to it in the Temeraire series, so I'm not as heavily affected by this. I've also read Uprooted and things like that. But she can be very focused on a first-person perspective. There's a lot of exposition going on that's more naturalistic than a lot of writers, I feel. But it can turn some people off. However, the one thing Naomi Novik gets down, it's one thing she has in common with Rachel Aaron in a very different way, it's that she really nails characters. When Naomi Novik writes a character, she tries to give them these hopes and desires and all that, and she makes them very consistent in the character while still making them human enough to be flawed. My best example of this would have to be, let's see here, Elle, Galadriel, who is just a fantastic character. Basically, in the first book, we learn that Galadriel's mother, Gwen Higgins, ran to her father. And her father was basically the great-grandson of this famous seer, who's still alive, actually. And being able to predict the future is really hard, because humans are very flawed creatures, and even if I can tell you how to get something, just because you want something doesn't mean it's what you need or what you actually want, what'll make you happy. The thing with her grandmother is, her grandmother can actually tell you what'll make you happy, what is actually best for you. And when people really like following her advice, which makes her advice very, very useful. She has this very clear vision, and she foresaw events decades in the future as a child. So people listen to her. Anyway, her father, who, everyone in their family gets advice, and her father either didn't follow it, or he did, and he was always destined to have a tragic ending because he was devoured by a Maw-Mouth, getting Gwen and Elle, who was still unborn at the time, out of the Scholomance. Her mother went to go find him, though, and they did actually, after some time. It wasn't this whole thing where they just never found him, because his family is actually pretty famous. They invited her and Elle to go stay at their compound. I was like 4 at the time. And she ran over to her grandmother to go play, and her grandmother had a horrible vision, apparently, of Elle destroying all the enclaves of the world and causing ruin and despair. Which, you know, even though these people are like super pacifists who would never even kill a fly for mana, they're like pure mana, which means they don't cheat on mana. Cheating on mana is when you kill small insects or whatever. It won't damage you internally, not in any way that's visible or that'll affect your mana, but it's still Malia, which is when you rip the magic out of something. It's a negative to the universe. And the universe's checkbook has to be balanced. When you put evil into the world, evil comes back after you. Oftentimes you put too much good into the world. If you're too kind for no cost, evil will come out. But if you're evil for yourself, then evil for others will be created. It's this kind of universal balance. Things are supposed to be balanced. Put too much evil into the world, and you might create a good reaction to balance it out. And it gets balanced in different ways. Sometimes evil creates evil, sometimes good creates good, sometimes evil creates evil. It just depends on how the universe is balanced. It depends on if you're giving or taking, that kind of thing. And the way it ended up working is that, at least in the first book, we're implied that Gwen is like this super hippie. She's always super kind. She loves everyone. She'll build up tons of mana and use it to heal people for free. She gives out all her spells for free to like this guy who sells them in a magazine. And she's like, oh, I don't need anything. It's okay. You go off and have fun. And she's super nice, and probably the only reason Elle isn't like a magic vampire by the time the series starts up. Because she was always taking small animals Elle wanted to use for a bit of magic and being like, no, my dear, I'll just take you over to the ice cream shop. It's okay. We can just let the bird go. Ooh, we can give it a little splint, or we can watch over it and make sure it has a peaceful passing. All that stuff. She's basically good incarnate. So Elle was destruction incarnate. Her affinity is for annihilation, destruction, summoning armies of demons, that kind of stuff. However, there was always something a little weird about it. And a lot of people thought that maybe it had something to do with her father. Her father did essentially the kindest thing you can do, which is willingly walking to a mom out to save essentially his girlfriend and her wife. Which is a fate so horrible that such a great act of good had to bring evil into the world. Like, you can't do something that selfless without there being a counterbalance. But it always seemed a bit off. Like, yeah, these are really nice people who did really, really horrible good things without any regard to its effect on balance, but at the same time, Elle is really powerful. And her grandmother's prophecy did her a lot of damage. And it's always been a little off. But at the same time, we thought there was going to be some big twist around her destiny. And her whole thing has been about proving it wrong. And in this book, we finally get some good resolution on that, and it is one of the best moments of the book. She gets to sit down with her grandmother again, and it's this really low point for her that you just cannot help but be amazed at Naomi Novik's writing. She clearly planned out how this prophecy was going to play out from the beginning. She knew exactly where she was going with this. Every part of the twist plays out, and I just cannot help but be respectful of this. In addition, we have Orion, who has been sort of like the constantly happy, little weird, but like in a fun way, opposite. He was like the foil to Elle. And basically, whereas Elle was this dark sorceress in waiting, who everyone always got really bad vibes from, Orion was the ultimate Mao killer. Basically a giant tragedy happened in the Scholomance a few months before he was born. Everybody links it to him. Where a few dozen students went Maleficer, drained all the other students from magic, used it to graduate, and then were hunted to death by the Enclavers who were angry their kids had gotten killed. As a result of this, the universe essentially, we were told at least, the universe used this to balance out with Orion. He was born with the ability to kill Maus really easily, to cast combat spells with ease, and also to drain magic from the Maus he kills. That way he can keep killing them. He's basically a one-man army. During the graduation hall in the last graduate, he was flinging combat spells like no big deal. He's essentially a one-generation talent like Elle, and they're both really powerful. If anyone had known about Elle, he'd probably be treated a lot more like Orion, just with a lot more unease rather than hero worship. And they were kind of foils, you know? He's destined to kill all the Maus in the world to prevent any other tragedies from happening, to make up for this horrible tragedy. And she's a result of all the good, and she's now a dark sorceress destined to cause tragedy. So, yes, I really like the main two characters. You also have side characters like Lisa. She's the valedictorian of the school. She's like the smart one. She's not afraid to get all up in Elle's face. All the other students are kind of afraid of her because they've learned that she is basically one of the most powerful sorceresses on the planet. As long as she has magic flowing into her, she can basically kill all of them at once. And Lisa is always going to tell her, no, it's a stupid idea. No, here's the plan. I need you to do this. And she has a very good understanding of Elle and Orion's abilities. During the planning for the graduation run, she was sort of the head planner. She weaseled her way there, and nobody could stop her because she was just that good. And to be the valedictorian, you had to be like super smart, super talented. And she was like, nobody thought she was even in the running. So all the other valedictorians didn't like sabotage her and stuff. She was able to completely stealth her way to the valedictorian's spot. So her and Elle have a very interesting relationship. It was almost antagonistic when it first started, but like Elle, she can be a bit grumpy, but she's not really evil. She has reasons for the way she is. Then you have Ardia. She's one of Lou's best friends. She was the closest thing Lou had to a friend in the beginning of book one. And her family had told her she's not going to be a popular kid in this place, even though she was popular in school, because she's not an enclaver. And when she saw Elle, and Elle treated her fairly in all her dealings, everyone looked at Elle and felt something horrible. And Ardia was told by her parents, look, you don't ostracize the weird kids. You don't ostracize anyone who's willing to work with you. Because guess what? If they're willing to work with you, if they do their fair share, if they treat you fairly, that means they're someone who you can count on. You don't just throw that away in a dangerous place like the Scholomance. So she was willing to trade fairly with Elle and eventually became friends with her because, Elle was willing to work with the one person who had treated her fairly even when she wasn't this dark sorceress. You have Lou, who she's a great character, has an affinity for mice, and has a great character arc I'm not going to spoil with her family trying to get an enclave, learning the secrets, and dealing with the fallout for that in this book. In addition to that, you have Chloe from the New York Enclave. We don't really see her much in this book. We do see her, and she learns this dark secret about the future leader of her enclave, Orion's mother. And that twist is just great. Orion's father is also a fun guy. He acts very distant to Elle until he realizes that, holy shit, Orion actually seemed to care for another human being. What the hell is going on? He has this very distant standoffish, like, oh yes, I'm sure you did this. And then Elle's just like, look, Orion's already dead. I don't want to join your enclave. I just want to know where the doors are, and I want some magic, because I have to go in there and kill Fortitude and Patience, or Fortitude Patience, whatever you're going to call it, so that Orion can have a peaceful death. Now, will you give me the magic or not? Because I can go to London and ask them if you won't. And Orion's dad just kind of stares at her. He's like, holy shit. And then he looks at Chloe. He's like, wait, will you tell the truth? Oh, you have to tell me everything. Please, please, please. I know my voice gone, but you have to tell me everything about how he was actually happy for a little while. It was just this wonderful moment. I loved it. Aside from that, we also get to finally meet the only other person who killed a Mawmouth, the Shanghai Domina, which is really, really fun. I like that interaction near the end of the book, though. A lot of spoilers, not going to spoil it. Aside from that, you also have to deal with the Enclave War, which gets me into the setting. Moving away from the characters now, this book is interesting because it's the first book that's mostly set outside the Scholomance. We do go back to the Scholomance for a bit, and the final scenes are in front of the door. However, it is also the biggest problem. Now, granted, I like to be able to explore the wizarding world. And Elle is constantly hunting down Mawmouths and having to deal with Enclave wars and politics, so it's not without danger, but okay, so the last book took all the Mals, lured them into the school, or at least like 99% of them, and then hucked it off into the void, destroying it. And even after they go back in, let's just say a Mawmouth ate them all. It's true. It is true. A Mawmouth ate everything in there. And so there are basically no monsters left in the real world. The real world is like super safe. Like safer than kids. Kids are safer outside the school than they are inside, which is really, really good. And as a result, the story lacks the focus. In the Scholomance, everything was leading up to whatever the end of the year was. You had the seniors and their graduation, and the problems that involved in the first book. You had Elle and her graduation, which had a lot of issues and a lot of tension throughout book 2. And the Scholomance itself was such a good setting, and stripping it from the series, which is named for that setting, you lose something. You do. The book has a lot of filler contents. A lot of scenes seem to drag on longer than they should. There's a lot of repetition of facts that were brought up in earlier books that are there to remind people of the rules of the world. I think it goes on a little too long. I think it's a little too drawn out in places. Possibly because it was originally supposed to be 2 books and it got stretched out into 3. And while I love the content that is there, I think there's some filler content that did not need to be there. I think that not being in the school hurt the series in a lot of ways. This is still probably the second best book in the series, I'll say. I like it more than Deadly Education, which is surprising. But it's not as good as The Last Graduate. The Last Graduate had a very tight plot with good twists, excellent pacing in my opinion, better than either of the other books. And it feels like the pacing dropped back down to the level of Deadly Education, which is a bit of a disappointment. I wanted to see her keep that really tight pacing for the third book. And it can't really be helped because the Scholomance gave the characters very clear rules, social standing, and goals, and they're very confused and a little off-kilter in this book. Enclaves are going down left and right. There's smallmouths all over the places. People are in a panic. What's going on? Is there an Enclave war? And while that was there in the second book, because Bangkok Enclave was destroyed during the events of A Deadly Education in the outside world, and people came in and were like, Bangkok is gone, nobody knows what happens. There was all these tensions about an Enclave war, but they were all tensions between students and afraid they're going to start a war in the school before it actually starts. Now the war is basically going to start. Everyone knows it. Everyone's just waiting for the first blow. And even once it starts, it's very small scale, which makes sense. There aren't a lot of wizards compared to normal people. And the rules behind where magic can be performed and how mundanes can screw with it is very interesting. I like it. It explains... Wait. There's a reason that mundanes don't understand magic. It's not like Harry Potter. I even love what they do with muggles. I'm not going to go into that here. I'll talk about that in the spoiler section. But the book is good. It has good pacing. It's just not great pacing. And I expected more from it after The Last Graduate. With all that said and done, let's go over the conclusion. Naomi Novik's The Golden Enclaves, Scholomance Book 3, is a very good book. I need to make this very clear. Naomi Novik has an excellent writing style that I very much enjoy. It takes a bit of getting used to, but it is really good. If you've gone through the first two books, this is definitely going to be on your list. She resolved her cliffhanger, thank goodness, because Naomi Novik could make some truly cruel cliffhangers. Thanks for that, Naomi Novik, for making me stress over this book for like a whole year. And it is just a fun world that I would honestly like to see more of, but this story seems to be about done. It's a good conclusion. Some people probably won't like the ending, but I did. All in all, I mean, it's a book by Naomi Novik. You knew this thing was not going to get anything lower than a 9 or an 8 for me. It got a 9. 9 out of 10 for The Golden Enclaves. It is one of the best urban fantasy books this year. Check it out. You can find links to my previous reviews on both A Deadly Education and Last Graduate below in the description, as well as links to where you can buy this book, both audio and regular. I would highly recommend the audiobook by Anisha Dadia. She's the reader for it, and she does a great job reading over the book. Seriously, give it a try. With all that said and done, we're moving on to the spoiler section. Warnings! There are massive spoilers that completely redefine how you view certain aspects of this world. They truly do reveal the twist of the prophecy, and that will heavily distort how you view the previous events of the first and second book. If you have not read those yet, if you have not read this book yet, go read the other two, read this book, and then come back here. Okay? Everybody gone? If you're not gone yet, go to the description, go to the timestamp on screen. If you want to skip over and just get to what we're going to be doing after, the other books coming up, other reviews. Okay, everybody good? All right, let's get started. So, okay, where to even start? All right, let's get started with the magic system, because I do want to talk about it. I didn't talk about much in the review because I've already talked about it before, and it's necessary for anybody who decided to listen to the spoiler section. In case you can't see, I'm looking at you like you shouldn't do this. You should go read these books. So the magic system for this series is based heavily on belief and balance, and sort of like a loose, soft magic system. Basically, you can generate mana through effort. You have to put effort into things to generate it, and magic is based on the belief. So wizards not only have the ability to store mana, that's like an innate ability they have. It's a physical, biological thing. They can store mana. That's what makes a wizard. And mundanes can rarely be born as wizards. However, you and anyone who views the magic has to believe in it. In addition, even wizards don't 100% believe that, say, objects can just appear out of thin air. They understand it's magic, but it's still difficult for them. Like, for example, when the school wants to summon your graded papers back to your desk, basically it either has to do so in a cubby where you're not looking at it, or it has to do it when you look away. This is because it takes more effort to summon something out of thin air if somebody's watching it. And mundanes do not believe in magic. Even the people who say they do, on a deep level, don't believe in them. You have to, like, believe in magic. And it's not like religious belief. Elle described it in the first book as, wizards believe in magic the same way mundanes believe in gravity. Like, on a fundamental level, since you were an infant, you understand that when you drop something, it falls down. Like, your body has experienced this dragging sensation, the effort it takes to hold your hand up every day. And that's how mages are. They've experienced mana flowing through them and weird things happening since they were infants. Mundanes, at least nowadays, do not believe in magic. They were raised to believe only in the fundamental natural laws of the world. And as a result, when they view magic, it becomes way more difficult, and if a mage tries to use magic in front of them on a regular basis, they can lose the ability to use magic. And you might be like, well, after they see somebody conjure a fireball or light a match without doing anything, wouldn't they believe? Well, there's also a huge amount of mundanes who practice fake parlor tricks, and mundanes are really good at compartmentalizing things they don't believe in as tricks or whatever. Like, Elle grew up in a commune of people who believe in all sorts of weird things like snake goddesses and stuff, but when she tried to do magic around them once or twice, it was really difficult, and they were like, okay, that's weird. And the next day they were like, wow, those are some weird mushrooms, huh? Basically, very few mundanes actually believe in magic. And as a result, if a kid is born like a mudblood in Harry Potter, where they're like a, magic kid born in a mundane family, they generally don't even know it. And a lot of times they get eaten by mals whenever they're left alone. Like, mysterious disappearances and stuff. We actually did get to meet one kid, Louisa, in the first book. I say meet, we never actually saw her. She was just mentioned. She was already dead by the time the story started. Basically, the theory for what happens is occasionally they get pulled into the Scholomance. But you're like, what, isn't the Scholomance like a boarding school? They have to get an enrollment? Yeah. Occasionally a mage kid will die. And their parents just won't bother to tell the school. So when the school goes to pick them up, it can't find them. So it grabs the nearest magically inclined child from around there. Usually that's actually just a wizard. Occasionally, if it's an independent wizard family and their kid died and they're still grieving, they didn't tell the school, the magic will to pick them up, won't find them, and will still grab one from like a nearby house or something like that. If there's another mundane capable of using magic. And it's theorized there are a bunch of mundanes who could use magic. But they're raised mundane, so they don't believe in it. And even if they saw it and realized that this is the power that's been flowing through them, and their subconscious belief allows them to do it, because they subconsciously have felt mana before, they just, didn't believe that's what it was because they were raised mundane, they're still surrounded all the time by mundane people, and they don't have anyone to teach them how to actually use magic. Even though it comes naturally to a lot of people, it's still something you have to be taught and learn to use effectively. As a result, when they do get pulled in here, they don't bring any supplies, they're not trained on any of the protocols or rules, and they die really quickly. The only reason Louisa survived to her third year is because Orion was doing everything he could to protect students like her. They usually die almost immediately. Which I think is actually one of the best aspects of this book. It does something Harry Potter did very poorly. What it does is it explains, okay, this is how magic works in the urban world. This explains why, very clearly, non-wizard people don't believe in it. The best example the book gave is that a lot of kids send their wizard kids to mundane schools so they'll be safe, because when Malficaria are basically magically bound creatures, they're magically constructs or weird amalgamations of magic and intent that steal magic to survive. They're, they kill wizards because they're good meals. And when one of them went after Elle as a kid, the PE coach saw it, thought it was a rat, and started hitting it with a broom. And although Elle couldn't have killed it with all the magic her mom had at that age, the teacher was able to smack it with a broom because he thought it was a rat, so it was a rat. And it looked like a squashed rat by the time he was done hitting it. Which is, that right there just explains everything you need to know on how the magic system works. With that out of the way, and all the belief stuff in there, and I've talked about, the counterbalance and the natural order of balance magic needs to exist, let's discuss how enclaves are made. See, enclaves are put up in the void, but it takes a stupid, ridiculous amount of magic to do it. Now, powerful wizards like Elle or Purachana, who made the Golden Enclave spells, can do small enclaves, like little hovels, that can be used to tuck your kids in, basically create a shared bedroom for kids that's very well protected and has only one entrance so that mals cannot get in. But modern enclave techniques are really weird, because they use a lot of magic, but they are still just cast by normal circles of wizards, and they somehow put up skyscrapers in the void. So you're like, okay, that's a little weird, right? And we learn how they're doing it. See, wizards actually can't, most wizards anyway, Elle could probably channel something similar to that, but she cannot, most wizards can't channel the amount of magic needed to put up an enclave. So they channel it through something else. They use the magic to compress a human being inside an urn with the rune, like enchantments for longevity and immortality, and then crush them into a paste, magically immortal. It turns them into a Mawmouth core. And the agony of that core forever powers the Enclave's gate. So basically what happens is they create a monster loose into the world, and the agony it creates acts as a mana generator, which is why they're also constantly hungry for mana. Essentially, they create an unspeakable horror and are allowed to perform a miracle. So for every gate an Enclave has, they've made a Mawmouth by ritualistically sacrificing a human child to an eternity of endless agony. Oh, and also all the other people it eats. Yeah. And Patience is the Mawmouth that was created to build the Scholomance. And it's eventually revealed this is part of the reason why Elle's mom never liked Enclaves. She couldn't stand it. It felt like Malia. And having been raised on pure mana, not using any Malia, not even what is technically allowed by most people, Elle can feel it too. And she realizes it. And even after she kills London's Mawmouth, and then, because every time she kills a Mawmouth, she's bringing down an Enclave or destabilizing one with multiple entrances. And eventually, after she goes to another Enclave in the Asian Enclaves, she helps them out. And she finds out they're trying to sacrifice Lu to build the new one. That's what she figures out at first, is that they're sacrificing people. But she starts getting suspicious when she looks at what they did. She barely manages to save Lu. She tries to save the Enclave. And Orion, who they'd already saved and found alone and feral after her mom had healed him in the Scholomance, they go in there, Chloe, Adia, and Liesel. They go in there, they get him out, and they bring him back. Chloe wasn't there, but they go and bring him back. They find out Orion's mom is a Malphicer. That's where they got all this. They had the great conversation with his father. And they learn that basically Enclaves are used to sacrifice. And there's all these rules and compulsions, so Lu couldn't actually tell them. All she could do was call them and sit there crying, because any confirmation or denial could be seen as giving away the information. It's very strict rules. And it's clearly designed by whoever made this strict, very cruel process to make Enclaves to prevent people from spreading the knowledge of how exactly they did it. Horrible process all around. But in the end, Elle is mildly happy, right? She hasn't realized that there are Mawmouths she's killing are bringing down Enclaves, that her grandmother's prophecy is already coming true. But she's still shocked. Every Enclave, modern Enclave at least, was built using these methods. What the hell? So she goes to visit her great-grandmother. She's a little shell-shocked at the moment, but she feels like she's done good, you know? I mean, this is also just after, when she finished saving that last Enclave, the council tried to kill her, and Orion just sucked the magic out of them and left. So she's also feeling very devastated. And she goes up to her, dad's family's house. She travels all the way to Mumbai all her own, still kind of shell-shocked the whole way, not even realizing people are starting to treat her like her mom and just giving her rides because she seems like a nice person. And she sees a Mawmouth at the gate. And it's just a very quiet moment almost, like, if it were in a movie, all the ambient music and sounds would cut away. Naomi Novik has this really good method of just grabbing the reader and making you feel like you're in a moment of just shell-shocked silence. And she calls Adia and Lu, and Liesel, and she's just like, the Enclave is going to be attacked. My grandmother's warning to them, because the grandmother had told this Enclave you're about to be attacked, and they were trying to reinforce it before it hit. She's like, make sure everyone's out of the Enclave. I'm not sure if my new foundation will hold against a fresh attack. And she kills it. She just kills it. It's already dead. She just reminds it that it's already dead and needs to die now, please. Because she's killed enough of these things that she can just tell them they're dead and they will die. Because they are dead. They should be dead. The only thing that's holding together is this anguish and magic forcing them to still remain here. They're already gone. There's no saving you once you're like that. And she walks through the doors, the wards to keep the Mawmouth out, still glowing as the family inside desperately tries to hang on for a bit longer so they can figure out how to get the children to safety. And she just walks in and she just sees her grandmother just sitting there waiting for her. Because she's realized what the runes of immortality were trying to make Lu into. What they were trying to do to her friend. What they've all done hundreds of times. Because now she knows how Mawmouths are born. And it's horrifying. And she just stares up at her grandmother, is like, why? And her grandmother very straightforwardly says, if I had told you anything else, you would not either not be alive today, or Ophelia of New York would have gotten her hands on you. In every future where you walk in there and she's prepared for you, you do not come out, or you come out so twisted that I wish you had died. That would be a kinder fate. And Elle hates her grandmother. She hates her. Her grandmother saw a future so horrible that it made her peace-loving family that would not use Malia even to kill an insect to save their own lives into people who contemplated whether or not they should put her down as a baby. And her great-grandmother's prophecy has defined her life. It ruined her in Elle's mind. And now she's figuring out that prophecy, what she told her about what she was told about what grandmother saw, great-grandmother, was the only future where Elle lived. And Elle just kind of sits there with her for a little bit, and the grandmother goes on to explain, the great-grandmother, she talks about Elle's father. And she says, I saw his future. And I was like, why didn't you warn him then? It's like, because he lived with me. He knows how my powers work. He knows I see all of the possibilities of the future when I see a vision like that. And in every future where I told him something, where I told him anything that would prevent him from killing himself, you or your mother did not make it. Either your mother got eaten by a mammoth, or there was some kind of miscarriage. And inevitably he realizes what I did. That I sacrificed one of you, the two people he loved more than anything else, for him. And whenever I do that, whenever he realizes that, he kills himself. And she could not bear being the one who drove her great-grandson to suicide, because she had loved him. He was kind of like her favorite. And so she allowed him to walk into a mammoth, knowing that one day his agony would be ended by his granddaughter. Knowing that she could do him that one single kindness. And you sort of realize that the grandmother basically committed a horrible crime that she has hated herself for every day. And the only reason she could do it is because she knew eventually her grandson, their favorite grandson, would be put to rest. And her great-granddaughter would be able to do it because she would be alive to do it. She would be sane and happy. And it eats at her. And the two of them eventually go in to find the circle wizard still putting up the ward because they don't know the mammoth's dangerous. And the grandmother says it's all right. She explains to the rest of the family what she did. And Elle's grandparents, her son and her daughter-in-law, look at her in horror. They look at the great-grandmother, they realize what she did, and then they also know how her powers work, which makes them even more angry, because in some futures where the grandmother hadn't been quick enough, or Elle's mom hadn't been quick enough, the grandfather took Elle out into the forest and killed her, weeping and sobbing, and then he threw himself off the cliff, still holding her dead body, because he could not live in a world where he killed his granddaughter. And he thought about doing that. And looking at the grandmother, he realized that she saw him do that, and so she had to tell him at just the right time so Gwen would take him out of the house. And even though he hadn't done it, he still would have if the grandmother had even been a little bit off. And yeah, realizing that your mom almost got you to kill your granddaughter of your dear beloved son who was dragged into a mammoth, and then commit suicide, kind of screws with your relationship. And although they don't blame her, they also say, we cannot live here anymore, we will be leaving as soon as we are able. And they do. They actually don't stay with the family anymore because they cannot bear to live in the same house as the great-grandmother. Even though she's the only reason Elle's still alive, she still told them that horrible, painful lie that caused them all to essentially ignore and abandon their beloved granddaughter for most of her life. And it's this beautiful moment of, yeah, she did the right thing. The great-grandmother clearly knew best. The end future result that we got out of this, even with the factor of free will involved, was the best. but she had to do something horrible to make it happen. And they don't shy away from how horrible it was. Like, the great-grandmother doesn't get, like, the whole family isn't like, well, you did what you had to do. No, they're like, you did what you had to do, but we cannot live with you after that. I'm sorry. There are lines, and maybe you had good reason to do it. Maybe it was necessary, but you crossed a line. You crossed a line that you cannot come back from. And I have a lot of respect for the book doing that, because a lot of the time they try and glorify stuff like this, like, hey, look, we all had to make difficult decisions. Like, no. Sometimes you do something so horrible to someone that you love because you needed to do it because it was best for them, and they're going to hate you for it. You can't stop that. And that's, you really start to realize, like, after everyone had been treating her great-grandmother's Seer's gift as, like, the best thing in the world, you suddenly realize, wow, being able to see the future that accurately, to know what people actually make people happy, must suck. It must be horrible. And, yeah. Turns out, Orion eventually, and then Elle realizes how Orion was made from the Shanghai leader during the war, when they all gather near the Enclave. They're, about to go to war. The two camps are ready, almost at each other's throats. New York in the west versus the Eastern Enclaves led by Shanghai. And she goes in there because, Great Enclave War started. Ophelia's going to use Orion, who went back to Earth for answers and to try and see if he can die, as a weapon. She turned him into an inverse Mawmouth. She took her infant baby, did the whole crush a human body in a, immortal container thing, and then she took the power and used it to literally rip the Mawmouth inside out to bring back the humanity. That's why he can suck the magic out of mouths. And once he saw patience and fortitude, he was so horrified by realizing where his hunger came from that he was willing to sit inside the school for the safety of the rest of the world. It's why he was nearly feral, because he had given himself into the hunger and eaten everything. And he can still feel all the people, the humans that patience and fortitude ate, because they're still inside him in agony. And he just wants Elle to kill him. And she won't, because he's like one of the only people who understands her, who gets what she's going through, and she loves him. And he's been keeping it together for her. But at this point, he's just done. He wants to die. He needs to die, he says. And Elle is apparently the result of a lot of shit. So Orion is the result of Ophelia's horrible act by creating the Mawmouths. She organized the Malefisor ring, apparently, according to rumor. And it's also a counterbalance to the cruelty of creating enclaves in general. Her desire was to stop it from ever being done again, or at least to heavily limit the amount of enclaves being created, and then have Orion eat the Mawmouths once they're made. Sort of solution. However, Elle was also a solution, because she can kill Mawmouths, and she can create the Golden Foundation needed to stabilize it. So Ophelia would have looked at Elle and seen someone who could, basically, they can create a single Mawmouth with using only one sacrifice. Elle can kill it and then give this place a Golden Foundation without it eating anyone else. Or Orion could devour it afterwards. Basically, together, they would give one complete control over what is essentially a green enclave building technique, or a golden skyscraper building technique. And the Shanghai enclavers had also been looking for Elle because they realized that Ophelia's act of malice had to have created something else. Not to mention, the reason Elle has the Golden Enclave book is because her mother and father attempted to summon it using an open-ended cost, so it could take anything from them, and they hadn't realized that Gwen was already pregnant with Elle. So her suffering in her life, her grandmother's prophecy, in addition, the open-ended request for the Enclave, the Golden Stone Sutras to give her the ability to build the Enclaves, combined with the horrible acts of Ophelia, which were also a counterbalance to the creation of Mawmouths as a whole, is why Elle is so overpowered. It's like, yeah, when you have that much cosmic weight behind you, we knew once Ophelia did this that there was going to be a lot of cosmic weight in the other direction. But once your parents did the Stone Sutras and then your father willingly walked into a Mawmouth, yeah, you were basically designed to be the ultimate counterbalance to Orion. And Orion was already a sort of pseudo-counterbalance to the Mawmouths, which kind of just ping-ponged their power up a notch. Which is why they're so hideously powerful. And Elle has to, basically told by everyone, you have to kill Orion. Ophelia will use him, and she will lose control, because you and I have both been inside a Mawmouth. And we know that their hunger never ends. Ophelia thinks she can control Orion. Orion knows that he will eventually lose control. Eventually, the hunger will become so powerful he won't be able to stop it. Once he got a taste for patience and fortitude, he had essentially gotten a taste for human magic. And either you kill him, or he will devour everything but you, and then will sit inside an empty, dying world until the end of time with all of us screaming inside of him. But Elle doesn't. What she does is do an inverse of Ophelia. You know how she built golden foundations for everyone else? Well, she essentially starts killing Orion, but then she drags everyone else's magic behind hers and forces them to essentially rebuild Orion a golden foundation. Basically, his core, the magic keeping him from disappearing into the void, is the Maw-Mouth. It's at the core of his being. So what Elle did, she killed him. She told him he was already dead, which is what he wanted her to tell him. And then she starts a golden spell. And if it fails, not only does the school go down on top of their heads because they're near the gate, but they will also die from the backlash of magic. So she basically bullied everyone else into joining in for their own selfish reasons. And essentially built Orion a new foundation in the void. She kept him alive while killing the part of himself that he didn't want. And it's this great moment where everyone joins together, but it's very clear they're doing it because they don't want to die. And afterwards, Orion acts as not only the new foundation for the school, but also the sort of like the watcher for it. Like, I'll build a separate foundation, but he's also attached to it still because of patience and fortitude, I think. And he acts as the new guard. He kept his magic absorption abilities, and because, he believed he's always had them, so of course he still has them because of the belief system of magic. And he guards the gates now, making the Scholomance a lot safer. Most of the Maos are dead. And nobody really knew, aside from the Shanghai Enclaver, because only someone who's been inside a Maw-Mouth, who's done enough work, who's realized the timing, would be able to know. No one else really ever figured it out, aside from Liesel, who was there when Elle was killing one and put everything together. So most people still think there's some evil Maleficer out there striking down Enclaves. And occasionally, Elle's great-grandmother will send an Enclave a warning. They'll call over Elle to build a golden foundation, and then she'll go hunt down the Maw-Mouth she's destined to kill after the grandmother tells her. And Liesel and Elle admit this is unsustainable. Eventually somebody's going to piece it all together. But for now, they're happy. Elle's building Golden Enclaves. She's managed to teach the spell to a circle, so it doesn't need one person anymore, so you can build smaller Enclaves. They don't need this horrible, horrible ritual to make. However, everything's not perfect. The adults are still trying to keep the Enclave building spells, the secret behind them, suppressed. Like, the Shanghai Enclaver doesn't need to know them because he figured it out on his own. However, anyone who bought the spells, basically everyone aside from Elle, her closest friends, Liesel and Orion, and the Shanghai Enclave, don't really know. And any time that someone tries to spill the beans, the contract obligates the others to try and keep it a secret. So, whenever they try and post it online, it gets deleted, or erased, or lost, or corrupted. And so the only way to tell people is to tell every single wizard individually, truth by truth. And it's hard to get one of them there because they're all very busy. So the information is spreading very slowly, and they're being fought by their elders every step of the way. In case you haven't noticed, it might be I don't know, maybe it's a metaphor for climate change, about short-term ambitions and the destruction it can later cause. And yes, everything is a freaking climate change analogy these days. I don't mean to find this, it's just there, okay? It's an existential fear baked into our generation. What do you want to do? Ugh. I'm not even joking, it really does feel like this. I mean, think about it. They built a great society with several flaws, but that seemed like the best option they had on the back of a energy source that was inherently destructive and will eventually screw us all over. And then they even had the whole thing about third world countries or developing countries using it as a sort of counterbalance. So for those you don't know, a lot of people are putting emphasis on China to start getting a lot of renewals, stuff like that, or other smaller countries that are currently industrializing. And those countries' excuse is, well, why do you get to industrialize using the fossil fuels but we don't? And you're still using a lot. Why are our developing countries that actually need this putting it on it when you guys could be turning to renewables faster, but you're resisting it? Why is the onus on us? You've done the damage. We're doing damage, but we haven't done as much as you have. And there's this interesting parallel because the Shanghai Enclave realized what was going on. And they tried to get New York to slow down the produce of enclaves. They even bring up the U.S.'s development at one point and said, after the U.S. Started industrializing, enclaves were going up once a year. And now we're being told by Ophelia, we were being told we need to slow down enclave building because there are too many Maw-Mouths. but they get to keep doing it at the same rate they've been doing after their boom. And so in retaliation, Shanghai spread the spells around for really cheap and tried to get even more enclaves built. And it's this very interesting parallel because it shows how they were both trying to screw each other over because no one could come to a compromise. Which, yeah, real life, doesn't that just sound... Wouldn't that be horrible if the people in charge couldn't come to a safe compromise and were willing to screw over our long-term survivability for short-term gains and digs at the others? And Ophelia and the Shanghai Domina both realize this is unsustainable and been trying to find something. Basically, they've been committing atrocities with the hope that balance would give them a key to a new path. And Elle rightfully says, "You are both monsters." It's like, yes, but I was the monster who was asked to stand down even though we were dying. They're the monsters that sat in comfort and luxury and asked us to die so they could be comfortable. It's like, yeah, he's not wrong there. That was kind of a dick move. They're not entirely in the wrong, and he has tried to do right where he can, even with these wrong methods. Like, the Eastern Enclave used to be way less powerful with the exception of Japan due to its close ties to New York. And as a result, they didn't get as many seats in the Scholomance and their kids were dying. So what do you do? All in all, it's a very interesting dilemma. I think the core argument of the Enclaves is very well presented, even with the climate change metaphor hanging over its head, like everything else. So, yeah. Wow, this has gone on a long time, but books are complicated. There's a lot to talk about. So, with that out of the way, we're going to move on to the announcements. So, I know I still have Steel Rising to get out. I'm sorry this video took so long, by the way. This is coming out in, hopefully on Thursday or Friday, the 21st or the 20th. And I was not able to get my last two videos out. I've been really busy working on the DLC, or not DLC, but the new Halloween update for the video game, Court Sort VR, that we've been working on. It's going to be like 6 new levels. We cranked them out mostly in like 2 weeks. And it's been exhausting. I'm completely destroyed at the moment. I'm hoping I can get Steel Rising's review out sometime this weekend. That way I can still get 2 reviews this week. I still won't be able to make it my review from last week, the last Friday one I never got out. But that's just the price of doing business, I guess. Anyway, aside from Steel Rising, which I still need to cut up footage for, we will also be reviewing Halloween Ends as a movie because, oh gods, I have to talk about this. Halloween franchise, you need an intervention. Anyhow, in addition to that, we also have 2 new TV shows that are coming up that I want to watch. Well, one that's already come out and one that I'm going to be watching and reviewing. First up, we will be having the Dragon Prince Season 4 coming out soon. I'm so happy for this. I'm so excited. It's going to be so much fun. I love the Dragon Prince. It's a great show. Go watch it. And Season 1 of Pantheon will be over. I think it just already released the episode ending like a week ago. And I'm going to go ahead and watch that. Go ahead and see it. Experience this climactic ending to what is one of the best sci-fi shows this year. And that should be up soon, within the next week or so. So look for all of that coming soon. I hope to see you guys back here eventually. And thank you for putting up with my week of silence. See you next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. On your screen, you should be seeing a link to my channel. You go there and subscribe, that'd be great. In addition, you'll be seeing 2 other links. One's to my Season 2 playlist. That's all the videos from 2022. In addition, below that, you should be seeing a link to a video that YouTube apparently recommends you click on. So, why not click on it? See one of my other videos. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe it'll have something else you'll enjoy. Maybe YouTube doesn't know shit. We'll find out together.